The worst heartbreak isn't losing someone you love. It's discovering they were never yours to lose. The engagement ring looked perfect in the photo. A single diamond catching the golden light of a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Elegant. Timeless. Expensive. Exactly the kind of ring a successful doctor would buy for the woman he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. I stared at it longer than I should have. My thumb frozen above the screen. My heart doing something strange inside my chest. The post had only been online for 12 minutes, but it already had thousands of likes. Hundreds of comments. Congratulations. You deserve this. So happy for you both. My eyes kept returning to the same image. Ava Brooks smiling beside Daniel Carter. Her dark curls dancing in the evening wind. Her brown eyes brighter than the city lights behind her. She looked happy. Genuinely happy. And for some reason that hurt more than I wanted to admit. I closed the app and placed my phone face down on the kitchen counter. The apartment suddenly felt too quiet. Too large. Too empty. Rain tapped softly against the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. 38 stories below. Headlights drifted through the streets like rivers of light. Normally the view calmed me. Tonight it did nothing. Because somewhere across the city, the woman I had spent 5 years thinking about was celebrating her future with another man. Ethan Morey stood near the window with a glass of untouched whiskey in his hand. The ice had already melted. He hadn't taken a single sip. His dark suit jacket rested over a chair. His tie hung loose around his neck. Anyone looking at him would have seen a powerful businessman ending a long day. No one would have guessed that a single social media post had managed to accomplish something no rival, no negotiation, and no financial crisis ever could. It had left him completely speechless. 5 years. 5 years of watching from a distance. 5 years of convincing himself that silence was safer. 5 years of believing that protecting her mattered more than being loved by her. He remembered the first time he saw Ava. A rainy Thursday afternoon. In Brooklyn. She had been carrying 3 boxes into a community art center, while trying to hold an umbrella against the wind. The umbrella lost the fight. The boxes slipped from her arms. Paint supplies scattered across the sidewalk. Everyone else walked past. Ava laughed. Actually laughed. Then she crouched down and started gathering everything by herself. Something about that moment had stayed with him. Maybe it was her resilience. Maybe it was the way she smiled when life became difficult. Maybe it was the simple fact that she looked nothing like the people who normally surrounded him. Whatever the reason, he never forgot her. And now she belonged to someone else. Ethan's phone vibrated on the counter. One message appeared on the screen. It came from his oldest advisor. Simple. Direct. Just 3 words. Have you seen? Ethan looked at the message for a long moment before locking the phone again. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere beyond the river. Inside, the silence felt heavier than ever. Because for the first time in 5 years, Ethan Morey realized he was running out of time. And for the first time in 5 years, he wasn't sure silence would protect him anymore. The next morning, Ava Brooks woke up believing her life had finally started moving in the direction she had always hoped for. Sunlight spilled through the large front windows of her gallery, painting golden rectangles across the hardwood floor as she unlocked the door and stepped inside with a paper cup of coffee balanced in one hand. The engagement ring caught the morning light when she reached for the switch. For a moment she smiled. Then she got to work. The gallery had become her second home over the last 4 years. Every painting on the walls represented a local artist who needed a chance. Every sculpture in the corner represented someone who had almost given up. She loved this place more than she could explain. What she did not know was that she almost lost it 3 years earlier. Back then, the landlord had decided to sell the building. The rent was scheduled to increase by nearly 40%. Ava had spent 2 sleepless weeks calculating numbers that never worked. She remembered sitting alone at her desk long after midnight, staring at spreadsheets and overdue invoices, wondering how much longer she could keep fighting. Then something impossible happened. The sale collapsed. A new owner stepped in. The rent remained unchanged. She had called it luck. Everyone called it luck. It was not luck. 30 blocks away, Ethan Morey sat in a private conference room reviewing reports he had already memorized. His attention was fixed on a photograph displayed on a tablet screen. Ava stood outside her gallery laughing with the delivery driver. The picture had been taken less than an hour earlier. Ethan stared at it longer than necessary. 5 years of collected moments lived inside encrypted files. Birthdays, grand openings, charity events, tiny victories nobody else noticed. He knew the names of her favorite coffee shops. He knew she preferred walking instead of taking rideshares whenever the weather was nice. He knew she donated part of every gallery sale to youth art programs. The information was never gathered because he wanted control. It was gathered because distance was the only way he allowed himself to care. His phone vibrated. Another message from his advisor. The engagement party is next Saturday. Ethan locked the screen immediately. Across the city, Ava spent the afternoon helping a teenage artist hang paintings for an upcoming exhibition. By evening, the gallery buzzed with conversation and music. Friends stopped by to congratulate her. Customers admired the ring. Everyone seemed excited about the future. Ava tried to share their enthusiasm. Yet every now and then she felt something strange. The sensation that she was forgetting something important. That someone was standing just beyond the edge of a memory she could not quite reach. As the event ended and the last guest drifted toward the door, she stepped outside into the cool evening air. Across the street, a black sedan sat parked beneath a street lamp. Nothing unusual. Just another luxury car in New York City. Ava barely glanced at it before walking toward her apartment. Inside the vehicle, Ethan watched her disappear around the corner. Then he closed his eyes. 5 years. 5 years of silence. 5 years of staying in the shadows. And for the first time, the distance he had carefully maintained felt less like protection and more like a mistake. Some people think silence is strength. They are wrong. Silence becomes a prison when you stay inside it too long. 3 days after the engagement announcement, rain washed across Manhattan in thin silver lines. Ava stood inside her apartment folding invitations for a celebration she had once dreamed about. The small dining table was covered with envelopes, ribbons, and handwritten notes from friends. Daniel had spent the morning at the hospital and promised he would stop by later. Everything should have felt perfect. Instead, she found herself staring out the window more often than working. The feeling had returned. That strange sense that someone was missing from a story she could not remember. Across the city, Ethan sat alone in his office long after sunset. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the city lights back at him like distant stars. A folder rested on his desk. Inside were photographs spanning 5 years. Not surveillance. Not obsession. Memories. Moments he was never supposed to have. The first charity event where Ava spoke about supporting young artists. The grand opening of her gallery. The afternoon she organized free art classes for children in Brooklyn. Ethan remembered every detail. What she wore. What she said. The way she smiled when nobody realized she was being watched. He should have destroyed the photographs years ago. Instead, he opened the folder again. The oldest picture sat on top. Ava standing outside the community center during that rainy Thursday 5 years earlier. That was where everything began. Not because he fell in love at first sight. Ethan never believed in things like that. It happened later. Slowly. Quietly. One choice at a time. A week after seeing her for the first time, he learned the community center was about to lose funding. The building would close within months. Hundreds of families would lose access to programs they depended on. Ethan solved the problem anonymously. Nobody ever knew. Months later, Ava organized an art fundraiser. Ethan attended. Without introducing himself. He stood in the back corner wearing a dark suit while everyone focused on the artwork. She spent the entire evening helping guests instead of promoting herself. That was when he realized something dangerous. Ava cared about people more than she cared about success. The realization stayed with him. So did she. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. His advisor entered carrying a tablet. "There is something you should see." Ethan looked up. The screen displayed a photograph uploaded less than 20 minutes earlier. Ava and Daniel touring a wedding venue. Both smiling. Both looking completely comfortable together. Ethan stared at the image. Then another. Then another. Every picture felt heavier than the last. His advisor hesitated before speaking. "You cannot keep doing this forever." Ethan said nothing. Because his advisor was right. 5 years of silence had protected Ava from his world. 5 years of distance had allowed her to build a life untouched by the complications surrounding him. But now that same silence was leading her toward another future. One that did not include him. Later that night, Ava stepped onto her apartment balcony. The rain had stopped. Cool air drifted between the buildings. Somewhere below, traffic hummed through the city streets. She wrapped her arms around herself and looked toward the skyline. For a brief moment she felt watched. Not threatened. Not afraid. Just noticed. The feeling disappeared as quickly as it came. Yet miles away, Ethan stood beside his own window looking toward the same city. And for the first time in 5 years, a question entered his mind that refused to leave. What if staying silent was the one mistake he could never fix? The engagement party was exactly the kind of event Ava had always imagined. Warm lights hung above the rooftop garden like tiny stars. Soft music drifted through the evening air. Friends laughed around small tables covered with white flowers and candles. Beyond the glass railing, Manhattan stretched toward the horizon in a sea of golden lights. Everything felt beautiful. Everything felt right. Ava stood beside Daniel greeting guests as they arrived. Every few minutes, someone stopped to congratulate them. Someone asked about wedding plans. Someone complimented the ring. Daniel handled the attention effortlessly. He always did. He remembered names. He listened carefully. He made people feel comfortable within seconds. Watching him interact with everyone around her reminded Ava why she had fallen in love with him. Daniel was kind, reliable, present, things that mattered. Yet every now and then, she caught herself looking toward the entrance without understanding why. The feeling made no sense. She shook it away each time it appeared. Across the city, Ethan sat alone in a private dining room overlooking the Hudson River. A business meeting had ended nearly an hour earlier, but he remained in his chair staring at untouched coffee. The room was silent except for the distant hum of traffic below. His phone rested beside him. The photograph from Ava's engagement party still glowed on the screen. She looked radiant beneath the lights. Happy. Secure. Everything he had wanted for her. So why did it feel like he was losing something he never had? Ethan leaned back and closed his eyes. Memories surfaced immediately. The first time she received a positive review in a major art publication. The day she signed the lease for her gallery. The afternoon she spent 3 hours helping an elderly artist hang paintings before her own exhibition. Hundreds of moments. Thousands of details. 5 years of watching a life unfold from a distance. 5 years of convincing himself that distance was enough. It had been easier when she was alone. Easier to believe there would always be time. But now there was Daniel. Daniel with his easy smile. Daniel with his future plans. Daniel with the ring on Ava's finger. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to admit a truth he had spent years avoiding. He was jealous. Not angry. Not bitter. Just jealous of a man who could stand beside her openly, while he remained hidden in the background of her story. Back at the party, Ava stepped away from the crowd for a moment and moved toward the railing. Cool air brushed against her skin. Below, traffic moved through the streets like streams of light. She smiled softly as she looked over the city. Then her phone vibrated. A notification appeared. Someone had anonymously donated $50,000 to expand the Youth Art Scholarship program she had been trying to launch for months. Ava stared at the screen in disbelief. The donation had arrived less than 10 minutes earlier. No name. No explanation. No message attached. Just the money. Her heart swelled with gratitude. Somewhere in the city, a stranger believed in her dream. She had no way of knowing that Ethan had authorized the transfer less than an hour before. No way of knowing he had done similar things for years. No way of knowing that while everyone celebrated her engagement, the one man who truly understood how much she meant to him was sitting alone wondering if silence had already cost him everything. The first crack appeared on a Tuesday afternoon. It arrived so quietly that Ava almost missed it. The gallery was busy preparing for a weekend exhibition when her assistant walked into the office carrying a folder and a confused expression. Ava looked up from her desk. "What is it?" The assistant placed the folder in front of her. "Someone paid for all the event expenses." Ava blinked. "What do you mean all of them?" "Every vendor. Every rental company. Every delivery service." The invoices were marked paid in full this morning. Ava opened the folder. Page after page confirmed the same thing. Thousands of dollars in expenses had disappeared overnight. No company names. No sponsor logos. No publicity requests. Just anonymous payments. Her stomach tightened. The scholarship donation. Now this. 2 impossible acts of generosity within a few days. Felt less like luck and more like a pattern. That evening, Daniel met her for dinner at a small restaurant near Central Park. Rain tapped gently against the windows while candlelight flickered across the tables. Normally Ava loved places like this. Tonight her attention kept drifting back to the folder in her bag. Daniel noticed immediately. Something is bothering you. Ava hesitated. Then she explained everything. The scholarship donation. The paid invoices. The growing feeling that someone had been quietly helping her for longer than she realized. Daniel listened carefully before leaning back in his chair. Maybe somebody believes in what you are building. Maybe they do not want recognition. Ava nodded. That explanation should have comforted her. Instead it left more questions. Because deep down she could not shake the feeling that whoever was doing this knew her personally. Very personally. Across the city, Ethan stood alone on a balcony overlooking the river. The night air carried the scent of rain and distant traffic. His phone buzzed with another report. The exhibition expenses had been covered successfully. No connection traced back to him. Ethan locked the screen and slipped the phone into his pocket. He should have felt satisfied. Ava's event would succeed. Young artists would benefit. Everything had worked exactly as intended. Yet the feeling inside his chest refused to settle. Because he knew she was having dinner with Daniel. He knew she was probably laughing. Smiling. Planning a future. The realization followed him like a shadow. 5 years ago, silence had felt noble. Now it felt cowardly. For the first time, Ethan wondered if he had hidden behind good intentions because he was afraid. Afraid she would reject him. Afraid she would see the complicated reality surrounding his life and walk away. Afraid that loving her openly would somehow damage the very happiness he wanted to protect. Later that night, Ava returned to the gallery to grab a forgotten sketchbook. The building was quiet. Empty. The city lights glowed through the front windows. As she crossed the lobby, something caught her eye. A framed photograph hanging near the entrance. It showed the gallery on opening day 4 years earlier. Ava had seen it hundreds of times. Tonight something felt different. Her gaze drifted toward the crowd in the background. Toward a man standing near the edge of the photograph. Dark suit. Dark hair. Partially turned away from the camera. She stepped closer. Her heartbeat slowed. The face was difficult to see. Almost hidden. Yet something about him felt strangely familiar. Ava stared at the photograph for several long seconds. Then she whispered words that disappeared into the empty room. Who are you? Miles away, Ethan stood beside his window looking at the same city. Completely unaware that after 5 years of silence, Ava had just discovered the first clue leading directly to him. Curiosity can be louder than fear when a question refuses to leave your mind. Ava returned to the gallery the next morning before sunrise. The city was still waking up. Steam drifted from street grates. Delivery trucks rolled through nearly empty roads. Inside the gallery, silence wrapped around the rooms like a blanket. She walked directly to the framed photograph near the entrance. The same photograph she had stared at the night before. The same shadowed figure standing near the edge of the crowd. Ava removed the frame from the wall and carried it into her office. 20 minutes later she was scanning the image into her computer. Enlarging it. Adjusting the brightness. Zooming closer. Little by little the details sharpened. Dark suit. Broad shoulders. Distinctive features. Not enough for certainty but enough to confirm one thing. The man had been watching from a distance. And somehow he seemed familiar. Her phone rang. Daniel. Ava smiled and answered. His voice instantly softened her mood. They talked about wedding plans, guest lists and schedules. Everything sounded normal. Comfortable. Safe. Yet after the call ended, her eyes drifted back to the photograph. The unanswered question remained. Later that afternoon, she decided to review old gallery records. What started as a simple search quickly became something else. One file led to another. One invoice led to another. Then she noticed something strange. 4 years ago, during the gallery's opening month, an anonymous donor had covered a significant equipment expense. 3 years ago, when rent almost increased, a mysterious ownership transfer had solved the problem. 2 years ago, a scholarship fund appeared unexpectedly. Again and again the same pattern emerged. Anonymous support. Perfect timing. No explanation. Ava leaned back in her chair. Her heartbeat quickened. Somebody had been helping her for years. Not once. Not twice. Repeatedly. Outside, rain began tapping against the windows. Inside a private office, overlooking Midtown Manhattan, Ethan stared at a report he had no interest in reading. His thoughts kept returning to Ava, the engagement, the photograph, the growing sense that something was changing. His advisor entered carrying a tablet. Ethan barely looked up. She started asking questions. Ethan's eyes lifted immediately. What kind of questions? About the gallery, donations, property records, anonymous transactions. Silence filled the room. Ethan slowly stood and walked toward the window. Rain streaked across the glass. 5 years of careful distance. 5 years of protecting her without expecting anything in return. He had always known discovery was possible. He simply never believed it would happen now. Not when she was preparing to marry someone else. Not when he had already convinced himself to let her go. Meanwhile, Ava opened another archived document. Then another. Her breath caught. Every anonymous contribution connected to a single trust. The trust itself revealed almost nothing, except for one name listed as an executive signatory years earlier. Ethan Morey. Ava stared at the screen. The room suddenly felt smaller. The city sounds outside faded into silence. She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Successful businessman. Powerful investor. Extremely private. But why would a man like Ethan Morey spend years helping someone he had never even met? Ava looked back at the photograph beside her desk. At the man standing in the background. Then at the name glowing on her screen. And for the first time she realized the answer she was searching for might lead directly to the one person she had never noticed was there all along. The truth rarely arrives all at once. It arrives in pieces. Fragments. Small discoveries that slowly rearrange everything you thought you understood. Ava spent the next 2 days trying to convince herself there had to be another explanation. Maybe Ethan Morey had supported hundreds of community projects. Maybe the gallery was simply one of many investments. Maybe the timing was coincidence. But the deeper she looked, the harder those explanations became to believe. Every road seemed to lead back to him. Every anonymous act of generosity appeared exactly when she needed it most. By Friday afternoon she finally made a decision. She was going to ask him herself. The opportunity came sooner than expected. That evening, Ava attended a fundraising gala for local arts programs. The ballroom overlooked the Hudson River. Crystal chandeliers reflected across polished marble floors. Conversations drifted through the room like soft music. Ava wore a simple navy dress and arrived with Daniel at her side. Everything felt normal until she saw him. Ethan stood near one of the windows at the far end of the room. Tall. Composed. Dressed in a black suit that seemed designed for the shadows. Several influential guests surrounded him, yet somehow he looked completely alone. Ava's breath caught unexpectedly. The photograph. The donations. The years of unanswered questions. Suddenly they all stood 20 feet away. Ethan noticed her almost immediately. Their eyes met across the crowded room. For a moment neither moved. Then Daniel gently touched her hand and the moment disappeared. Later, after dinner was served and speeches concluded, Ava found herself standing alone on an outdoor terrace overlooking the river. Cool air drifted across the water. City lights shimmered in the darkness. Footsteps approached behind her. She did not need to turn around. Somehow she already knew. Ethan stopped several feet away. Neither spoke at first. The silence felt strangely familiar. Finally Ava looked at him. Why? The single word hung between them. Ethan understood immediately. Why the donations? Why the gallery? Why all of it? He looked toward the river before answering. Because you needed help. Ava shook her head. That is not an answer. His expression softened slightly. It is the truth. You barely knew me. Ethan laughed quietly. Not because the question was funny, because it hurt. More than you think. Ava stared at him, confusion mixed with curiosity. For years she had imagined powerful people as distant and untouchable. Yet standing here, Ethan looked tired, almost vulnerable. She folded her arms. Then tell me why. Ethan remained silent for several seconds, long enough for the city sounds below to fill the space between them. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower than before. I stayed away because I cared about you. Ava felt her heartbeat stumble. Ethan met her eyes directly. I knew what my life looked like from the outside. I knew what came with my name. You built something beautiful on your own. I did not want my world touching yours. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. For the first time, Ava saw something she had never noticed before. Not power. Not wealth. Loneliness. 5 years of it. Neither of them noticed the ballroom doors opening behind them. Neither noticed Daniel stepping onto the terrace. And neither realized that the next few minutes would change everything. The moment Daniel stepped onto the terrace, the air changed. Ava saw it immediately. Ethan stepped back. Daniel slowed his approach. Neither man looked hostile. Neither raised his voice. Yet something invisible settled between them. Something neither could ignore. Daniel stopped beside Ava and offered a polite smile. I was wondering where you disappeared to. Ava nodded. We were talking. Ethan looked toward the river again. Then he straightened his jacket. I should leave. Daniel studied him carefully. You do not have to leave because of me. Ethan almost smiled. Maybe not. But I think I should. For a brief second, Ava wanted to stop him. The feeling surprised her. Ethan had been a stranger only days ago. Yet standing here now, watching him walk away felt oddly disappointing. Before she could say anything, Ethan turned toward her one last time. Take care of yourself, Ava. Then he disappeared through the ballroom doors. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Conversations continued. Music played. Guests laughed beneath the chandeliers. But Ava found it difficult to focus. Her thoughts kept returning to the terrace. To the look in Ethan's eyes when he admitted the truth. I stayed away because I cared about you. The words followed her home. They followed her the next morning. They followed her all week. Meanwhile, Ethan made a decision. For 5 years he had remained in the background of Ava's life. For 5 years he had convinced himself that distance was enough. Now he accepted something painful. Ava was engaged. She deserved the chance to build her future without confusion, without complications, without him. 3 days later, Ethan instructed his staff to cancel several projects connected to the gallery. Not because he wanted to hurt her. The opposite. He wanted to stop interfering. He wanted her success to belong entirely to her. By Friday afternoon, the process had already begun. That same evening, Ava arrived at the gallery and immediately sensed something was wrong. Several planned partnerships had suddenly stalled. Funding discussions that had moved smoothly for months now faced delays. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing permanent. Just enough to create concern. Her assistant looked frustrated. I do not understand. Everything was moving perfectly last week. Ava felt a strange heaviness settle inside her chest. For the first time, she realized how much invisible support had existed around her. Support she had never seen. Support she had never thanked. Later that night she sat alone in her office staring at city lights through the window. Her phone rested beside her. Ethan's number displayed on the screen. She had received it from a contact at the gala. She only needed to press call. Instead she hesitated. Across Manhattan, Ethan stood beside packed suitcases. A 6-month business expansion overseas offered the perfect excuse to leave. New markets. New projects. New responsibilities. Most importantly, distance. Real distance. His flight departed in less than 48 hours. For the first time in years, he believed he might finally disappear from Ava's life completely. Then his phone vibrated. A single incoming call appeared on the screen. Ethan stared at the name. Ava Brooks. His heartbeat stopped for one impossible second before crashing back to life. Outside his window, rain began falling across the city. Inside the silent apartment, Ethan reached for the phone. And everything changed. Sometimes a single phone call can change the direction of an entire life. Ethan answered on the second ring. Neither of them spoke immediately. Rain tapped softly against the windows of their separate worlds while silence stretched between them. Finally, Ava took a breath. "Are you leaving?" Ethan closed his eyes. He had not told anyone outside his inner circle. Yet somehow hearing the question hurt more than he expected. "Yes." Ava looked out across the dark city from her gallery office. "Why?" Ethan laughed quietly. Not because anything was funny. Because after 5 years of silence, the truth felt strangely simple. Because staying was becoming harder than leaving. The answer settled heavily between them. Ava understood what he was really saying. For several moments neither spoke. Then Ethan heard something unexpected. The soft sound of her crying. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just enough to break his heart. Ava wiped her eyes quickly. "I spent years wondering why things kept working out when they should not have. Why every impossible problem somehow found a solution. Why every time I was ready to give up something changed." Her voice trembled. "It was you." Ethan rested one hand against the window. "Yes." "Why?" The question returned. This time there was nowhere left to hide. Ethan looked out at the rain-covered skyline. "Because you mattered to me." Ava closed her eyes. More than a friend. Silence. More than a friend. More than anyone. The words finally existed in the open air. No more distance. No more hiding. 5 years of feelings reduced to a simple truth. Ava felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Daniel deserves honesty," Ethan continued quietly. "You deserve honesty too. I never expected anything from you. I never helped you because I thought it would make you love me. I only wanted your life to be easier." Ava pressed a hand against her mouth. The sincerity in his voice left no room for doubt. Later that night she met Daniel at their favorite restaurant. The conversation lasted nearly 2 hours. There were tears, difficult truths, gentle understanding, but no anger. By the end, both of them knew what had to happen. Some relationships are built on comfort. Others are built on destiny. The following afternoon, Ava stood outside the gallery watching autumn leaves drift across the sidewalk. A black car pulled to the curb. Ethan stepped out. For a moment neither moved. The city seemed to disappear around them. No bodyguards. No assistants. No meetings. Just two people standing face to face. Ethan looked tired. Vulnerable. Human. Ava smiled through tears. "You almost left." Ethan nodded. "You almost let me." They both laughed softly. Then the distance between them disappeared. Not because of money. Not because of power. Not because of obligation. Because for the first time, neither of them was hiding. Ethan looked into her eyes and finally said the words he had carried for 5 years. I love you." The city continued moving around them. Cars passed. People hurried down the sidewalk. Somewhere in the distance a siren echoed through Manhattan. But none of it mattered. Because after 5 years of silence, the man who seemed to own everything had finally admitted the one thing he never managed to control. His heart. And in the end, the woman he loved had never been searching for power. She had only been waiting for honesty.